Sometimes it is especially fun to do this job when I get to talk to people like Rick Wilson, who is a founder of the Lincoln Project, host of the Enemies List podcast, and we are going to be able to see him live in person this Sunday at City Winery at 7:30 when he and Molly Jong-Fast bring us Politics as Unusual. Rick, welcome to the airwaves.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. We're really looking forward to being up there.
It should be a whole lot of fun. Did I see you off in the distance at the Democratic National Convention?
You sure did. It was a hell of a week, I must say. And I've been to a lot of political conventions, but this was the first Democratic convention I'd been to as a guest and not as an uninvited heckler.
Tell us about your political background.
Sure. Well, look, I started out in politics in 1988. I was a guy who had studied, did Soviet studies and philosophy in college, and ended up going into campaigning. Worked for the older George Bush 41, as a young man. Went into Republican politics as a media consultant after that. Did races across the country, elected presidents, senators, governors, members of Congress. And back in 2015, whatever part of my soul had been inactive when Donald Trump came down that escalator, flipped over, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I cannot be a part of what I can see is going to happen when this guy takes power. And what is going to happen is that the party, for a long time, has this monster has wanted to come out since 2008 and Sarah Palin, and I wouldn't be a part of it. And so I wrote a couple books, Everything Trump Touches Dies, and Running Against the Devil. Started speaking out as a Republican and as a conservative against Trump, because I think the government has no business in people's lives the way Trump wants it in their lives. I believe in the Constitution, the rule of law. He believes in neither of those things. And so helped found the Lincoln Project back in 2019 and have been doing that ever since. And fighting the fight against Donald Trump every day, and dealing with the upsides of it, which is it's good to have a good mission, and the downside of it, death threats and crazy people.
Yeah, I know. You went public with the fact that not all that long ago you were swatted. Talk to the audience about that.
Yeah, my fiance and I were asleep at 3 a.m. and heard banging on our doors, and our phone started to ring. Walked outside to a bunch of heavily armed SWAT guys with AR-15s, and they had gotten a fake phone call saying that I've killed my wife, and there's blood everywhere, and I don't want to live anymore, and I have a gun. My name is Rick Wilson. Of course, it was fake, but I will tell you, it is a pretty terrifying experience, and that's part of what has become a real part of the MAGA culture is threats, intimidation, that kind of belief that they can do anything to anyone who opposes Trump, and that it's okay, and that people like me should be threatened with violence, and people like the folks who work at Lincoln should be threatened with violence. I mean, that's the downside of working at the Lincoln Project is you've got to have a pretty thick skin because bad people are going to say terrible things. They're going to threaten your family, and it takes somebody tough to do it, but I'm really proud to help lead a team of people who are going to stand on the front line against Trump until the very end.
Did they ever find out who placed that call?
They have not found out who placed that call. It's an ongoing investigation according to the FBI. Believe me, I'd love to know. I put a reward out there for it too, because it's just it is not the kind of thing that should be a part of our political dialogue. It should not be a strategy we use, or anyone uses in a modern democracy.
No, it shouldn't, and it's become one of the planks of the MAGA Republican Party, and I thought it was just so rich when we had this second guy taken into custody with a gun at a Trump golf course, and Trump's all, if Kamala Harris weren't stirring up all this violence, things, and I'm like, It's whatever Donald Trump, I have discovered, whatever he accuses someone else of is exactly what he is doing. And at some level, I think he knows it. It's sort of like the best defense is a good offense. I'm going to come after you before you have a chance to come after me. Just like in that last debate with Kamala, did you notice how he was the one before not that we knew she would even go there, but he was like, "You're a liar. Those are lies." It's like he wanted to get the lie word. He wanted to take charge of the lie word because he knew it would be coming his way.
Right. Look, he is a master of projection. There is no political figure of my lifetime, and I hate to say it, I've been in politics now almost 40 years. No political figure of my lifetime has ever engaged in the level of projection that Donald Trump engages in every day.
Yeah.
And that projection leads to things that it's a good tell of what he wants to do and what he's trying to accomplish, because when you hear him projecting the things, he's guilty. You know exactly what he's done, exactly what he's trying to hide, and that's helpful, but it also is difficult in our society because a lot of people don't have the discipline to go and really have like robust defenses in their mind against that. A lot of people like, oh, he's attacking them. There must be something there. There must be something they've done wrong. There must be something that person must be a bad person because Trump said so. But look, he's always accusing people of being Marxist and communist. He's the one who wants to take control of the economy and the government. I mean, yesterday he says he's going to seize the insurance industry, basically, and take over. Okay. I think I heard that once before, and Republicans criticized it. It was when you guys thought Barack Obama was a communist for wanting to do health care reform.
Yeah. Rick, in those early days, what drew you to the Republican Party? Do you come from a family of Republicans and it just seemed natural? Were there certain ideas that drew you in? Not
really. My mom was a young Democrat. And in fact, the way I place myself in history is a couple of days before I was born, she helped host a Young Democrats reception for John F. Kennedy.
Wow.
I was born on November 21st, and he was killed the next day to the minute. The minute. So but I grew up in the era of Reagan, and a lot of people haven't. It's hard to go back and see how a moment can shape a young man's beliefs or young woman's political beliefs. But that was a moment where the country seemed adrift under Carter. And again, we can debate whether it was true or not. It was the perception that we all, in that age had. And that idea was that he was the strong, optimistic guy who liked the country. And so that sort of shaped some of that. Again, I was a Soviet studies guy in college, and so I was part of that last generation of young Cold Warriors. We were going to defeat communism, and I was a guy who believed in freedom and liberty, and I believed that the country had a providential nature, that as imperfect as we were, that the Constitution was something that would enable us to be that proverbial more perfect union. But over time, I saw the framework of the party I thought I was a part of disappearing from underneath me. Back in 2008, watching the selection of Sarah Palin, for a moment I thought, well, maybe this populism of hers is going to be a net positive for the country. And then I realized it was going to go inevitably where it went. The Tea Party, which had a 5-second origin story of a group of people who wanted less spending, got taken over by people whose message was, hey, there's a black guy in the White House now, we have to get rid of him. And in 2013 or so, a memo I had written got circulated, and I'd written it years before, telling my political clients, the gay marriage thing, you have to stop it. It's what government business is there in whether or not people get married if they're gay? What possible government interest? anyway, that got unearthed, and Rush Limbaugh went at me for a few days, and I was just like, why am I even trying to help these effing people? And then Trump came down the escalator, and that was the moment that really, where I knew the party that I had once grown up in was dead. It was gone, and there's no saving it at this point. It is entirely corrupted at this point.
Pat Brady, who 11 years ago was head of the Republican Party in Illinois, I have him on every few months, and he said that he was kicked out of the Republican Party in Illinois because he was willing to support gay marriage. And he said, it wasn't like I was an ally. It wasn't like I was a big supporter of the LGBTQ community. I just didn't think it was anybody's business. I didn't think it was government's business to decide who could or couldn't get married. He said that was, to me, that was part of small government. But with the culture wars, he got swept up and swept out, and he's been sitting on the sidelines ever since. I want to talk to you. You've mentioned Sarah Palin twice, and that intrigues me, Rick, because as I look back on the history of our politics, particularly presidential politics, not that I've spent a lot of time really thinking about her, but when I do think about her, I think about her almost as kind of a footnote, like a little blip on the radar, somebody who wasn't properly vetted and turned out to be an embarrassment. But you've mentioned her twice as sort of the beginning of the end for the Republican Party. Explain to me why you said that, why you feel that way.
Because Sarah Palin represented two things, and look, and I didn't. It wasn't that I was a fan of hers at the time, but I recognized later that assertively anti-intellectual populism, which was Sarah Palin's entire brand, would inevitably lead to a party that looked more like her than like my boss, George H.W. Bush, and that looked more like the kind of precursors to nationalist, statist, populist authoritarianism that she turned out to be. She was a precursor. She was an early.
She was the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, she really was, and it really turned out to be. It really turned out to be something that was weaponized by Fox and by people like Steve Bannon and these hyper populists, where their argument that Sarah Palin failed because the elites killed her and the elites were mean to her, and it was an argument, by the way, that at the time I was not entirely unsympathetic to. The party had become very much a Washington D.C. pay-to-play, lobbying-driven, fairly corrupt enterprise, and there was a lot of money in that. Okay. And Palin, the argument that we should have people who don't go to Harvard, Yale, and elsewhere in the Republican Party doing some leadership stuff was one I agreed with and still agree with. Parties need a rich diversity of leadership. They don't just need people from Ivies. But in her case, that was a moment where you saw this hyper-nationalism coming, the Steve Bannon version of the Republican Party, which was much more racially inflected, which was much more aggressively pushing the anti-immigrant message in the country, which, the great irony of that is there was a great piece of video of George Herbert Walker Bush, my old boss, and Ronald Reagan one time at a presidential primary debate in 1980, fighting over which one would be able to bring in more hardworking immigrants to our country. It's just, if you watch it, both of them are like, we need to treat people with compassion and dignity and honor. George W. Bush, for as much as people don't like George W. Bush, one of his big priorities was to do a real immigration program in the country so that we could bring in the Dreamers and make sure that the DACA kids were covered, and to make sure we had a worker program that would help the entire U.S. economy and a path to citizenship. And now this incredibly hideous, cheap racial animus that you're seeing play out right now with J.D. Vance and they're eating the dog's garbage and all these things. That's become the definitional nature of the party that I can no longer be a part of.
Mm-hmm. So many things I want to ask you. Why has, at least to date, George Jr. been so silent?
I don't know the answer to that. I can't speak for him. I hope he reconsiders where his public position is at on this. If Dick Cheney, a guy,
I know,
another guy I work for,
which of these two Republicans will endorse Kamala, George Jr. or Dick Cheney? I would say, George Jr. for sure.
Well, look, I do believe that there are a lot of Republicans in the country who heard Liz Cheney, who's by the way, I want to emphasize her endorsement is also incredibly important. The former vice president's endorsement is important, but hers is also very, very consequential because she's seen the inside workings of the Trump's evils as the Jan 6 committee chair. And so, but the idea that W hasn't done anything yet. A lot of people are talking to him. I know this. I know a lot of people are reaching out to change his mind on it. He is not, from everyone's understanding, pro-Trump in any way. His thing is more like, what's the appropriate role for a former president? I have my opinions on that, and I think he should come out and he should take the wood to the guy. Honestly, I mean, I don't for a second believe that he's a Trumper, no. And I guess I can understand somebody who, I don't know. What do you think? It's like been there, done that. Leave it to the people who are still doing it. I'm just going to, ride off into the sunset. I don't know. Yeah, I don't have an answer for you on that. I wish I did.
And bottom line, Rick, who do these endorsements sway, if anyone?
Look, endorsements are whether they're on your side or the other side, generally speaking, don't have a tremendous impact. However, in this case, the real gettable group in most of these swing states turns out to be people who are sort of squishy, soft Republicans in a lot of these places. And in that regard, you definitely don't hurt yourself when you've got a guy like an Adam Kinzinger, a guy like a Dick Cheney, a woman like Liz Cheney, people like Michael Steele, even morons like me. We make a difference in helping say to some of our former colleagues, you're okay. This isn't going to kill you. You should do this for the good of the country. And many of them have. And we think that this kind of crossover vote is more consequential in an election like this than it would have been in an ordinary election, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I was at an event where J.B. Pritzker spoke a couple of weeks ago, and somebody asked him what the vetting process was like when he was part of the VP list, and he said it was like a 10-day colonoscopy. Uh-huh. Do you think the vetting process is different for the Republicans? And if so, do you think J.D. Vance was subjected to a 10-day colonoscopy?
Well, I can tell you, I have a little bit of inside information. They accepted as their vetting process the opposition research file J.D. Vance had done on himself in the 2022 Senate race. That's what they took for vetting. I've been a part of vettings. This is never like this. It is always an intense, consequential, serious, and legitimate examination, and it is like a colonoscopy. It is like a complete deep dive into your life, and a lot of it isn't very pleasant. A lot of it is very unpleasant, and the fact that Vance essentially seems to have skated through with the inevitable consequences, which is to say, every day there's some new piece of negative information coming out about J.D. Vance. It strikes me as kind of hilarious how badly they botched this, and that even a basic vetting would have told you that J.D. Vance is a walking gaffe machine. He's not very good at this work. And the hilariously terrible nature of Vance's performance is something that they're dreading now in the debate coming up. And I am, to use the phrase the kids use, I am here for it.
There was some reporting that speculated that Peter Thiel's money, since J.D. Vance is basically a sock puppet for Peter Thiel, that Donald Trump was inclined, maybe more than he otherwise would have been, to pick J.D. Vance, thinking that meant that Peter Thiel was going to open up his checkbook. A, do you think there's any truth to that? And speaking of inside information, I want you to also talk about what conversations are taking place behind closed doors, because recently J.D. Vance was asked a question and he said something along the lines of, either clearly I'm not supposed to talk about what Donald Trump would do, or I've been told, not to talk about, not to commit Donald Trump to any course of action. So clearly there have been conversations, but first of all, Peter Thiel's money, how much did that play a role?
Look, Trump wanted a lot of Peter Thiel's money. I don't think Peter Thiel has given him as much as Trump might have imagined. But I've heard that, that the idea in his mind that Thiel and Elon Musk and David Sachs and Mark Andreessen and all these other miscellaneous tech bro types were going to come across with a major set of contributions if they picked Trump's guy, was a definite factor in his thinking. But so far, these have gotten shorted by these guys. They have not come across to him with the major investment they were going to do. So they bought J.D. Vance into the campaign, but he's not really brought along behind him a major financial lift for the campaign, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And do you think he has been taken to the woodshed behind closed doors? Somebody saying, basically, just shut up.
Well, you know what? I think J.D. Vance the last couple of days has decided he's going to go all in, act as crazy as he can for Trump on the Haitians eating cats fantasy. And
what does he think? He's the next Laura Loomer? Huh?
Well, listen, I think Laura Loomer thinks she's the next Melania Trump, but that's another story for another day. So no, I think we're in a moment in the campaign where JD is in a sort of netherworld where he doesn't have authority to go speak in the way that Trump would like him to, nor does he have any sort of latitude to be his own guy anymore. It's like you're going to go out and be our meme candidate, vice presidential candidate. You're going to talk about the stupid stuff. And otherwise keep your mouth shut. I think that's where he's stuck.
Yeah. And have you met J.D. Vance? I mean, have you ever been...
I have. I've met him in the past. Yep. He was a never Trump guy. He was one of us, which is one of the things that truly irritates me about him is the public things you've seen him say are exactly the sort of private things he would say as a strong and frankly legitimate critique of Donald Trump. Cultural heroin, America's Hitler. I think J.D. Vance still believes those things, but the gods of ambition are so strong in him that he can't make himself be a truthful and honorable man.
Well, we see that over and over again. I mean, talk about somebody who checks which way the wind is blowing before she leaves the house. Nikki Haley. I'm this, I'm that. Oh, wait a minute, it's Tuesday. I forgot I'm the other thing on Tuesday. And do they think that people will forget? Like if Nikki, I assume Nikki is doing what she's doing because she's trying to put herself in a position to be viable in 2028. But does she think people are going to forget that she was this way and then she was that way and then she was the other way, then she went back to the first way? How does that help a candidate, Rick?
That is exactly Nikki Haley's problem right now. She is She is so morally and mentally compromised. She can't make herself do the right thing under any circumstances. She has reached the point where her desire to be president. Hey, look, this is a true statement about running for president. The only cure for wanting to run for president, wanting to be president, is death. People who want to be president really, really want to be president. They really want to be president. Nikki Haley really wants to be president. She looks at the current way that the Republican Party is constituted and has correctly assessed that unless she kisses Trump's butt, she will not ever be president. Now, here's the thing. She's never going to be president anyway. She just doesn't realize it yet. Once you've criticized him one time, you're permanently banned from MAGA. It's over. Even the guys that thought they got back in, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, all these other people, once they hate you forever. It's never getting better. And so, but she still thinks she's got to play, and she's looking at the map. She's saying, okay, Trump is in his 70s, and maybe if he dies in office or he gets thrown in jail or something happens, in 2028, it'll be an open primary. Nobody likes J.D. Vance, and I can snake in there. That's her line of thinking.
So she's thinking, I got to keep these MAGA people on my side.
Yep. That is exactly correct. She's got to keep them. She's got to keep them pacified and happy, and thinking that she's on the team. That is not, as a political strategy, that is not the dumbest thing I've ever heard. As a moral strategy, it is a complete catastrophic failure.
Rick Wilson and Molly Jong-Fast are going to be at City Winery in Chicago, the City Winery on Randolph Street in downtown Chicago, this Sunday at 7:30. They are going to have some guests. They are going to entertain you when they are going to be talking about elections. And there's a little blurb here that says that there will be wild games. You don't need to tell me about the wild games. Let my imagination run wild. I will assure everyone I work with my clothes on. There's nothing to fear.
But no, it's an awfully fun. I mean, look, we're doing this as part of this sort of broad pro-democracy idea that it's good to get people in a room and have a big conversation about things that we're talking about, not just on Twitter, not just on TV, not just on social media, but to sit down and she and I have a great conversation every time we're there, and we then open the floor up to folks to talk about what they're thinking, what their concerns are. And we've done 4 venues so far. It has been so much fun. We're really excited to come to Chicago, and hopefully we'll see you all at the City Winery on Sunday night.
citywinery.com/Chicago is where you can get your tickets. Rick, thank you so much for doing this.
Delighted to be with you anytime.
Thank you. Watch out. I'll take you up on that. Rick Wilson, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, host of the Enemies List podcast, going to be at City Winery.